Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 13, consists of Nurva, Dita, Fajryanti, Fitria Maulida, and Aisyah Al-Humairah. In this video, we want to present you about analyzing discourse. This video will talk about 5 approaches emphasize different aspects of the way discourse is used in communication. So, what is the relation between discourse and sociolinguistics? Discourse analysis provides a tool for sociolinguists to identify the norms of talk among different social and cultural groups in different conversational and institutional contexts, and to describe the discursive resources people use in constructing different social identities and interaction. Among sociolinguists, the term discourse is generally used to refer to stretches of spoken or written language which extend beyond an utterance or a sentence. Among those from other disciplines, and especially philosophers, discourse is a broader term. For these researchers, discourse is regarded as a means of structuring knowledge and social practice, and language is just one symbolic form of discourse itself. After knowing the relation, let's move to another information. There are 5 ways to do discourse analysis. This video provides a brief taste of just a small selection from a range of different ways of doing discourse analysis. So without further ado, let's hear the explanation about the first way.
Pragmatics and politeness theory. What is pragmatics? Context is clearly crucial in interpreting what is meant, and pragmatics extends the analysis of meaning beyond grammar and word meaning to the relationship between the participants and the background knowledge they bring to a situation. Pragmatics is concerned with the analysis of meaning in interaction. Conversational maxim and implicators. The information exchange between a pair of talkers follows the pragmatic rules or conversational maxim that Paul Grace, a British philosopher, proposed to account for our basic assumptions about interaction. He formulated this proposal as 4 maxims of cooperative talk, which can be summarized as follows. First, quantity. Say as much as but no more than is necessary. Second, quality. Do not say what you believe to be false, or that for which you lack evidence. Third, relation. Be relevant. Lastly, manner. Be clear, unambiguous, brief, and orderly. Robin Lakoff, an American pragmatics researcher who has been called the mother of modern politeness theory, introduced 3 rules of politeness. First, don't impose. For example, use modals and hedges. I wonder if I might just open the window a little. Second, give options. For example, use interrogatives including tag questions. Do you mind if I open the window? It would be nice to have the window open a little, wouldn't it? Third, be friendly. For example, use informal expressions, endowments. Be honey and open the window, darling. Brown and Levinson identified 3 social factors which they suggested qualified as universal influences on linguistically polite behavior. The first 2 are very similar to sociolinguistic. They are how well you know someone and what is their status relative to yours. The third factor is based on the ranking of the imposition, can influence the kind of politeness strategies which are appropriate. Linguistic politeness devices includes choice of pronouns, endowment terms, modal verbs, and modal particles. All these features may be relevant in the analysis of discourse in context. Sociolinguists examine the patterning of such pragmatic politeness devices and the usage of different social groups in particular social contexts, or in the construction of particular social identities. So, for example, certain pragmatic devices or even speech acts may be used more frequently by particular ethnics or social groups in specific contexts. For example, until the beginning of the 21st century, the fact was particularly associated with conversation involving Maori people in the New Zealand and contributed to the construction of a Maori ethnic identity. Rather than focusing on the social distance or solitary dimension, politeness in Asian culture tends to emphasize socio-cultural values, such as serenity, respect, and consideration, and negative politeness strategies of avoidance and mitigation endeavor to express these values. So, for example, in asking a friend for a loan of some money, a Chinese speaker will typically express reluctance and provide reasons as ways of mitigating the request.
The second material is ethnography of speaking. The ethnography of speaking approach is particularly valuable when describing communicative events for a group whose cultural or social norms are not those of the majority group. The framework it provides ensures that researchers do not overlook important features of the event, and also they do not overemphasize aspects which are business as usual for the participants. The framework that Delheims developed for analysis of communicative events involved the following components. First is genre or type of event, such as phone call, conversation, business meeting, lesson, interview, and blog. Second is topic or what people are talking about, such as holidays, work, social linguistics, and politics. Third, purpose or function, which refer to the reasons for the talk. The example is like to plan an event and to catch up socially. Fourth is setting, which means where the talk takes place, reverse at home, in classroom, or in an office. Next is key or emotional tone, such as serious, jocular, or sarcastic. Participants, which means the characteristic of those present and their relationship, like sex, age, social status, and role relationship. The next is message form, code, and or channel. The example is telephone, letter, email, language, and language variety. The next is message content or specific details of what the communication is about, such as organizing a time for a football match and describing how a tap works. The next is act sequence or ordering of speech acts, like greetings and ending a telephone conversation. The next is rules for interaction or prescribed orders of speaking. The example is like who must speak first or who must respond to the celebration at wedding. And the last one is norms for interpretation of what is going on. It is the common knowledge and shared understandings of the relevant cultural presuppositions. 3. Interactional sociolinguistics. This approach shares a great deal with the ethnography of communication framework from which it developed, but an interactional sociolinguistic approach pays particular attention to the clues people use to interpret conversational interaction within its ethnographic context. Interactional sociolinguists typically make use of the detailed tools of conversation analysis, paying careful attention to turn-taking behavior, hesitations, pauses, and paralinguistic behavior to interpret what the speaker intended. The example is like sigh, laughter, in-breath, etc. Contextualization cues. In analyzing any interaction from an interactional sociolinguistic perspective, the researchers look for contextualization cues, that is, features by which speakers signals and listeners interpret what the activity is, how the semantic content is to be understood, and how each sentence relates to what precedes or follows, to quote Gompers. Contextualization cues signal contextual presuppositions, that is, knowledge that the speaker assumes the listener has already or information that they can work out for themselves by paying attention to features of the context. Contextualization cues thus allow participants to infer the most likely interpretation of an utterance. They may take a range of forms. For example, the laughter and the teasing tone used by people serve as important cues that their comments are intended to be interpreted as humorous teases rather than serious suggestions. Miscommunication. Miscommunication is possible between any two people, but the potential is greater when the different social-linguistic norms are involved. Interactional sociolinguists have made a valuable contribution to identifying potential sources of miscommunication between different sociocultural groups. When people from different language or even different dialect backgrounds interact, clashes between discourse norms are possible, with a risk of miscommunication. Using an interactional sociolinguistic approach, we can look for clues to help interpret what speakers intended to communicate in the specific context of their talk.
Conversation analysis is a method of analyzing much more than conversation, but conversation is regarded as basic. Meetings and transactional interactions are described in relation to the view of conversation as a jointly organized activity, with the significance of any utterance highly dependent on its position in a sequence. CA is now used by researchers in many other disciplines, including sociolinguistics, who are interested in analyzing the structure of talk and explaining how we manage the rules of ordinary everyday conversation at the most micro level. Versions of CA are typically used by researchers with a range of theoretical frameworks. They treat CA as a set of discourse analysis techniques and apply it in as much detail as they consider useful for their purposes. Researchers who adopt a critical discourse analysis framework, for example, often use CA to highlight particular features of an interaction which exemplify how discourse constructs and maintains power relationships and props up a particular view of reality.
The last one is critical discourse analysis, or CDA. In CDA, there are some points that we need to know. The first one, critical discourse analysis, differs from all the previous methods of describing discourse mainly in the stance of the analyst, which is predictably overtly critical. Second, CDA by contrast is explicitly concerned with investigating how language is used to construct and maintain power relationship in society. The aim is to show up connections between language and power and between language and ideology. In CDA, sexist and racist language are obvious targets for the critical discourse analyst. The third one, critical discourse analysts often make use of aspects of other approaches. For example, many use a CA approach to describe the ways in which participants manipulate the rules of conversation in order to gain a political advantage. Or they may use interactional sociolinguistics to highlight the relevance of the social context in which people are operating and the underlying connections between language, power, and ideology. CDA researchers aim to expose the hidden messages and especially the taken for granted assumptions that underlie much of our everyday discourse, because advertisers make use of discourse to influence our behavior, typically to persuade us to buy their products. Adverts are one of the most obvious targets of CDA. A CDA approach focuses on the ways in which lexical choices such as riot versus protest versus demonstration, or hooligans versus protesters versus demonstrators subtly convey different ideological positions and different political sympathies. That's all from Group 13. We hope that this information will be useful for you. Thank you for watching.